Hey everyone, it's your sleepless historian here, whispering through the quiet hours once more. Tonight we're drifting back to the Middle Ages. Those long, slow centuries of stone walls, flickering rushlights, and lives shaped by rules that seem so strange to us now. Dim the lights if you haven't already. Maybe keep just a soft glow. Let the room feel like a low hearth in a thatched hut. Pull up the blankets, settle in deep. This is going to be a long, gentle wander through some of the weirdest medieval rules that actually existed for really good reasons. No excitement, no drama, just calm, steady facts floating by like leaves on a slow river. Because, of course, when your world is built of wood and straw, one bad spark or one hungry winter could end everything. So these laws, absurd as they sound today, were often quiet attempts to keep the whole fragile thing from falling apart. We'll take our time tonight. This is part 1 of 4, easing in softly with the rules around what you could wear and how you had to end your day. The words will move slowly, easy to follow as your breathing evens out. If sleep starts to pull you under, that's perfect. Let it. The past isn't in a hurry. You wake in the half-dark of your hut, straw shifting beneath you like a restless sea. Dawn light creeps through the cracks in the wattle walls, and you think about the day ahead, fields to tend, animals to feed, maybe a trip to market if you're lucky. But first, clothes. You reach for your tunic, that familiar rough woolen dull brown or gray, scratchy against your skin like a constant small reminder. It's the only thing you're allowed, because in the Middle Ages, what you wore wasn't just about staying warm or looking decent. It was law, sumptuary laws, rules dictating dress by rank, stretched across Europe, from England to France to the Italian cities. They said, clearly and firmly, where your station on your body. Peasants in coarse wool, merchants in slightly better cloth, but nothing too bright. Nobles in silk, velvet, fur trims that caught the light like small fortunes. Why bother? The reasons were practical, layered like the garments themselves. First, the social order. In a world without photographs or identity cards, a quick glance told you who was who. A lord in purple silk and ermine needed to be instantly recognizable, someone to bow to, defer to, respect. If a prosperous merchant or even a well-off peasant started wearing the same bright dyes or fine furs, the lines blurred. Imagine a noble riding through town, only to be mistaken for a rich commoner, or worse, ignored. The hierarchy that held everything together might wobble. Kings and parliaments feared that most of all, so laws drew the boundaries in fabric and color. Purple for royalty only, because the dye from sea snails cost more than gold. Cloth of gold or silver embroidery. Knights and above. Long pointed shoes, polanes curling so dramatically they had to be tied to your knees. Nobles, common folk out plain, practical boots shaped like actual feet. There was money in it too. Imported luxuries, silk from the east, fine dyes, furs like sable or ermine, drained coin from the kingdom. Nobles didn't want peasants or rising merchants wasting wages on finery instead of paying rent, taxes, or tithes. Looking good became a kind of economic crime. In England, under Edward III and later kings, statutes spelled it out. No velvet for those under certain incomes. No gold buttons unless you were a gentleman of means. In France, similar edicts restricted lace, metallic threads, even the length of trains on gowns. Enforcement? Spotty but real. Inspectors sometimes roamed markets or churches, checking hems and sleeves. Neighbors gossiped. Nothing spreads faster in a village, and a fine or public shaming could follow. Picture standing in the square, cloak confiscated, while the priest lectures you on humility. Because, naturally, the system preferred visible misery over visible ambition. Yet people found ways around it. A clever merchant might dye wool to look richer than it was, or a wife might hide a forbidden trim under a plain overdress. Laws got rewritten every few decades as fashions changed. New fabrics, new complaints. They rarely stopped the determined, but they reminded everyone, your place is marked and crossing costs. So you pull on that same scratchy tunic each morning, the one that's lasted years because nothing fancier is allowed. It itches, it smells of smoke and earth, but it's yours, legal, safe, expected. And in a world where one wrong choice could mark you as trouble, that counts for something. The day wears on. Work in the fields, the ache in your back familiar as breath. Evening comes, slow and gray. You're by the hearth now, the one warm spot in the hut. Flames low and comforting. A bit of bread, maybe some pottage if the pot's still warm. Then the bell starts. Deep, steady tolls from the church tower. Not calling a prayer this time. It's the curfew bell. Couvre-feu, cover the fire. At the sound, you must smother the flames, bank the embers, snuff any candles or rush lights. Darkness falls quick and complete. Why? Fire. Towns and villages were tinder waiting for a spark. Huts of wattle and daub, thatched roofs thick with straw, packed close together. One unattended ember from a sleeping family's hearth could leap to the roof, race along the street, turn the whole place to ash before dawn. It happened often enough. London burned more than once, Paris too. The curfew bell, rung around 8 or 9 depending on the season, was a simple, practical warning. Cover your fire, go to bed, keep the town safe. The word itself comes from that French phrase, cover fire. Practical, yes, but it left you in the dark. No late sewing by candlelight, too risky. No reading, even if you could. No quiet talk around the embers. You stumble to your pallet, tripping over tools or children, feeling your way. The rich in stone halls could keep fires going. Servants watched them. For you, enforced night. Ignore the bell, and fines waited. More than a week's earnings gone. The curfew did double duty too. Darkness kept people indoors. Fewer drunks wandering alleys. Fewer chances for fights or theft. In a time without street lamps or watchmen on every corner, it was basic crowd control. The government couldn't stop every crime, but it could make sure most folks were too tired or too blind in the dark to start one. So you lie there, eyes open in blackness, listening to the wind against the thatch, rats in the beams, the soft breathing of family nearby. The fire's covered, embers barely glowing under ash. Warmth fades slowly. Sleep comes in fits, broken by cold or dreams. But the town stands another night. No flames racing through roofs. No screams in the dark. The bell saved more than it annoyed, probably. Still, as you pull the thin blanket tighter, waiting for dawn, you feel the quiet weight of it. Rules made for safety, but they made the nights long and lonely. Let that settle now. The hearth cools, the words slow. We're just getting started. Tomorrow's part will drift into food rules, fasting days, and why even your dinner had to follow rank. But for now, breathe easy. Let the Middle Ages fade into the background hum. Sleep if it's calling. The history will wait. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Quiet Hours. It's your sleepless historian, right here with you again as the night settles deeper. If you drifted off during part 1, that's just fine. Pick up wherever your eyelids feel heavy. We're continuing our slow, soothing drift through the weird medieval rules that actually made sense in their world of mud, fire, hunger, and fragile order. Dim the lamp a little more if you can. Let the room grow soft and shadowed, like the inside of a thatched hut after the hearth's banked low. Blankets up, breathing slow. No rush tonight. This is part 2 of 4, and we'll linger longer on the things that filled your days and nights. What you ate when you couldn't eat it, and why even the wildlife in the woods had its own set of laws. The words will flow gently, like a long river winding through dark fields. Let them carry you. If sleep pulls at the edges, lean into it. The Middle Ages aren't going anywhere. Morning comes again, gray and damp. You rise from the straw, stretch the stiffness from your bones, and feel the familiar hollow in your stomach. Hunger is a constant companion here, never sharp enough to kill outright, but always present, like a low background hum. You think about food the way you always do. Maybe today there's a bit of leftover pottage, barley thickened with onions, and whatever greens the garden gave up. Or perhaps it's one of those days when the pot stays empty longer. But before you even reach for the wooden spoon, the calendar in your head whispers its own rule. Today might be Friday, or Lent, or Advent, or the eve of some saint's day you've half forgotten. On those days, meat is forbidden. Church dietary laws, fasting rules enforced by priests, bishops, and sometimes the king's own proclamations, blanketed nearly half the year. Fridays always meatless, because that was the day Christ died. Lent stretched 40 days before Easter, no flesh at all. Advent mirrored it before Christmas. Then came Ember Days, vigils, countless minor saints' feasts. Add them up, and you might face 200 days or more without beef, pork, poultry, or game. Instead, fish, salted herring, dried cod, eels if you were lucky, carp from the local pond. The smell of fish becomes the smell of the season. Why impose this? On the surface, piety, discipline the body, remember sacrifice, turn thoughts toward God. But peel back the spiritual layer, and the reasons were deeply practical, almost economic. Meat animals weren't just food, they were capital. Cows pulled plows through heavy clay soil, gave milk year after year, supplied leather for shoes and harnesses. Sheep produced wool for clothing, manure for fields. Pigs rooted in the woods, but even they needed acorns and scraps that could be scarce. Slaughter them all whenever hunger bit, and next spring you'd have no beasts to work the land. Famine would follow faster than the plow could turn soil. The rules stretched supplies across lean months. By pushing people toward fish, rivers, coasts, ponds, the church quietly supported entire industries. Fishermen thrived. Salt merchants grew rich, preserving the catch. Coastal towns built fleets. Monasteries ran fish ponds, turning fasting into profit. In England, records show herring shoals supporting whole villages. In France and the Low Countries, similar patterns. It wasn't cruelty. It was conservation dressed in prayer. A cow saved for milk today might feed your family longer than a single roast. The system kept the agricultural wheel turning, one salted fish at a time. Still, it didn't make the taste any better. After a day bent over the plow, facing yet another plate of bony herring or gray pottage with a few leeks floating like sad memories, it's hard not to resent it. The rich had workarounds, of course. Nobles ate lavish fish dishes, sturgeon, salmon, lampreys, and rich sauces. They even invented mock meats, almond milk capons, spiced vegetable pies shaped like roasts. For peasants, herring again. Sometimes so salty it made your mouth pucker, sometimes so old it tasted of the barrel. People cheated when they could. A quiet chicken in the yard, roasted behind closed shutters. A rabbit snared at dusk. Smugglers sold illicit meat in back alleys. If caught, fines, penance in church, standing barefoot while the congregation stared, or worse, excommunication for the stubborn. But hunger is persuasive. The rules bent, but they rarely broke. Let that thought drift. The pot cools on the hearth. The day moves on. Now imagine a quiet afternoon in the woods near your village. The leaves are thick, the path soft underfoot. A rabbit darts across your vision. Plump, quick, almost inviting. Your stomach rumbles. You could set a snare, have meat tonight. But stop. That rabbit doesn't belong to you. Hunting laws, forest laws, game laws, were among the strictest in medieval Europe. Forests weren't wild commons. They were the Lord's private reserve. Deer, boar, hares, even rabbits in many places, reserved for the nobility. The king or a local lord claimed exclusive rights. Poaching wasn't petty theft. It was a direct challenge to authority. Punishment scaled with the offense. Fines you couldn't pay, flogging, branding, loss of a hand, even death for repeated or serious cases. In England, under the Normans and later, the Forest Charter tried to soften things, but the core remained. The beasts in the greenwood were the lords. Why so harsh? Hunting was power displayed. A noble's chase. Hounds baying, horses thundering, arrows flying, was theater. It showed control over land, men, and nature itself. A peasant with a bow or snare undermined that. If everyone hunted, the game would vanish. Feasts would lack venison. The lord's status would dim. Economically, forests provided timber, charcoal, pannage for pigs, but the animals were status symbols first. The laws protected hierarchy as much as wildlife. Yet people poached anyway. Hunger doesn't listen to charters. Villages banded together for night hunts, silent traps, quick kills. Ballads romanticized it, the cunning peasant outwitting the forester. But when caught, the price was steep. A hand gone, a family left begging. The irony lingers. Nobles slaughtered dozens of deer in a single hunt for sport, leaving carcasses to rot if too many. Peasants risked death for one hare to feed hungry mouths. So you turn away from the rabbit. Walk home empty-handed. The woods stay quiet, the Lord's claim unbroken. Days blend. Work, hunger, the scratch of wool, the weight of rules. But there's more to come. In the next part, we'll drift into trials by fire and water, guilds that guarded every trade, and the bells that owned your time. For now, let the river carry you. Breathe slow. The night is long, the history patient. Sleep if it comes. We'll meet again when you're ready. Hey everyone, it's your sleepless historian again, right here in the soft hush of the night. If part 2 carried you off gently, welcome back. Or perhaps you're just joining now. The glow of your screen, the only light left. Either way, settle deeper. Pull the covers higher. Let the room feel smaller, warmer, like the inside of a low-beam hall after the day's work is done. We're drifting onward through those strange medieval rules, the ones that sound so odd today, but were woven tightly into survival. No hurry, no sharp turns, just a slow, steady flow of words, like rain on thatch or the distant murmur of a river you can't quite see. This is part 3 of 4, and we'll linger longer still. On the ways justice was decided when no one trusted words alone, on the guilds that guarded every craft like jealous keepers, on the bells that owned your hours, and on the strange suspicion that fell over public baths. Breathe slow. Let each sentence settle before the next arrives. If your eyes grow heavy, that's the point. The Middle Ages are patient tonight. The day has worn you down again. Fields turned, animals fed, hands raw from rope or tool. Evening finds you in the village square, perhaps, or near the churchyard wall, where gossip moves in low voices. But suppose something has gone wrong. A neighbor claims you stole a loaf from the baker's stall, or a tool went missing from the forge, or words were spoken in anger that shouldn't have been. In our time, we'd call witnesses, gather evidence, let a jury weigh it. In the Middle Ages, truth belonged to God, and God, they believed, could be asked directly through trial by ordeal. These weren't random cruelties. They were a system born of a world without forensics, without reliable records, without trust in human testimony alone. If two people swore opposite truths, and neither would back down, how else to settle it? The church and the courts turned to divine judgment. The logic was simple, almost serene in its certainty. If you are innocent, God will protect you. If guilty, He will reveal it. No need for clever lawyers or long debates. Just fire, water, or combat, and faith. Take the ordeal by hot iron. The priest blesses the iron bar, heats it red in the forge until it glows like a sunset coal. You grasp it, walk 3 paces, sometimes 9 if the charge is grave. The skin sizzles, The smell of burning flesh rises. Then the hand is bandaged with clean linen, sealed with the priest's prayer. 3 days later, they unwrap it, clean and healing. God has spoken. Innocent, festering, swollen, angry, guilty. The wound tells the tale, or the ordeal by cold water. They tie your thumbs to your toes, lower you gently into a blessed pond or barrel. Pure water, they said, rejects the guilty. If you sink, innocent, though you might drown before they pull you up. If you float, guilty, and the rope hauls you out for punishment. The church sometimes blessed the water first, making it holy enough to know the difference between truth and lie. Then came trial by combat. Accuser and accused meet on a marked field, swords or clubs in hand. God fights through the stronger arm. A trained knight against a farmer? The outcome often felt foretold, yet people believed. Witnesses swore oaths on relics. The priest prayed over the weapons. Victory proved innocence. Defeat, guilt, even if the loser lived. These ordeals weren't used for every crime. Petty matters stayed in the manorial court. But for serious accusations, theft of livestock, arson, murder, they offered a way forward when human proof failed. The reasons ran deep. Literacy was rare. Written records scarce. Witnesses could be bribed or frightened. In a time when oaths were sacred, but people still lied, divine intervention seemed the only incorruptible judge, and the rituals themselves carried weight. The priest's blessing, the holy water, the consecrated iron, they reminded everyone that justice came from above, not from men. Over time, doubts grew. Too many innocents burned. Too many guilty floated. By the early 13th century, the church itself withdrew support. Pope Innocent III banned clerical participation in 1215. Ordeals faded, replaced slowly by juries and evidence. But for centuries, they stood as a calm, terrible certainty. God decides. Let that settle. The fire in the square dies down. The accused walks away, or doesn't. The village returns to its quiet rhythm. Now imagine you've had enough of the fields, the ache in your back, the endless mud. You dream of a trade, baking bread that smells of warmth, forging iron that rings true, weaving cloth that doesn't itch. But you can't simply start. The guild waits. Guilds are the quiet gatekeepers of every craft. In towns across Europe, from London to Florence to Bruges, they controlled who could work, how, and for how much. Want to be a baker? Join the Bakers' Guild. A blacksmith? The smiths. Even carpenters, weavers, tanners, shoemakers, each had its brotherhood. Step outside the guild, sell bread or shoes on your own, and the fines came swift. Your stall might be smashed, your tools confiscated, your name marked as a foreigner to the trade. Joining was long and deliberate. First, apprentice, years of labor for little pay, sometimes none beyond food and a corner to sleep. You swept floors, carried charcoal, learned by watching. The master owned your time. Mistakes were corrected with a cuff or worse. After 5, 7, sometimes 10 years, you became a journeyman, wandering from town to town, working for wages, proving your skill. Finally, the masterpiece. A perfect loaf, a flawless sword, a shoe that fit like a second skin. The guild masters judged it. They had every reason to be strict. Fewer members meant higher prices, less competition. Why this tight grip? Quality first. In a world without labels or inspectors, the guild guaranteed the bread wasn't sawdust mixed with rye. The armor wouldn't shatter in battle. The cloth wouldn't rot after one rain. They set standards, tested work, punished cheats. Prices, too, regulated to prevent undercutting or gouging. A fair loaf cost the same whether baked by a young master or an old one. And protection. If illness struck, the guild helped. If fire took your shop, they loaned tools. In return, you followed the rules, paid dues, attended feasts where members drank together and remembered the dead. The system worked. Towns grew prosperous. Crafts reached heights of skill. But for the outsider, it felt like a locked door. A talented boy from the countryside might labor a decade only to have his masterpiece rejected on a technicality. Women were rarely admitted. Some guilds allowed widows to continue a husband's trade, but the craft itself stayed male. The guilds built cathedrals of stone and windows of glass, but they also built walls around opportunity. So you serve. You wait. You hope the masters nod one day. Time itself belonged to the bells. Dawn bell, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. The church tower rang them all, steady and unyielding. No clock in your hut, no watch on your wrist. Time arrived in sound, clang after clang, marking prayer, meals, work's beginning and end. The bells structured everything. Morning prayer pulled you from sleep. Noon bell meant dinner if you had it. Evening brought vespers, then curfew. Market opened with a peal, closed with another. Fire in the town? Bells. Enemy sighted? Bells. Someone died? Slow tolls that carried across fields. Why so many? Order and chaos. Most people couldn't read clocks or calendars. The bells were the public timekeeper, neutral, shared, impossible to argue with. They reminded peasants when to pause for prayer, when to rest the oxen, when to head home. In monasteries, the bells kept perfect rhythm. In towns, they echoed that discipline outward. But they owned you. Oversleep, and the morning bell announced it to everyone. Work late, and the vespers bell shamed you. The sound entered your bones. After years, you woke before the first clang, moved through the day in bell-shaped chunks. No choice, no silence, just the deep bronze voice saying, "This is your hour, this is your place." Let the echo fade slowly. The tower quiets. Night deepens. One more quiet strangeness before we pause. You save a few coins, hard-earned, hidden under straw, and think of the bathhouse. A soak in hot water, steam rising, the ache in your muscles easing. You walk to the door. It's barred. Shut down. Public bathhouses, stews, bagnios, once dotted towns. Men and women bathed together, sometimes separately, but always social. Talk flowed, gossip swirled, deals were struck. They were warm, clean, a rare comfort. But by the late Middle Ages, suspicion grew. Bathhouses mixed bodies, encouraged nudity, sometimes doubled as places of assignation. When plague swept through, authorities blamed them. Crowds, shared water, close breath. Syphilis arrived later, spreading fear further. Towns closed them one by one. London, Paris, many German cities, gone by the 15th century. The reasons were practical, in their way. Disease did spread in warm, damp rooms. Hygiene was poor. Water wasn't changed often. Yet closing them left people dirtier, itchier, smelling of smoke and sweat. Nobles kept private tubs. Peasants rubbed with rags or bathed in streams when summer allowed. The church added moral weight. Too much pleasure, too much mingling. Bathing became suspect. So you walk home again, skin still caked with field dust. You tell yourself it's cleaner this way. The body adjusts. The rule stands. The night quiets further. We've drifted far tonight, through fire and water, guilds and bells, steam and suspicion. Part 4 waits, with sumptuary laws revisited, plague quarantines, burial rules, and the final whispers of church power over speech and flame. For now, let the words dissolve. Breathe in, breathe out. The bells have stopped. Sleep if it finds you. The history keeps its gentle watch. Hey everyone, it's your sleepless historian, back once more in the deepest, softest part of the night. If you've been drifting with me through the previous parts, thank you for staying. Whether you're still awake or just stirring now, the glow of your screen pulling you gently back in. Either way, settle in deeper than ever. Let the blankets feel heavier, the room quieter, the air cooler like the stone walls of a medieval church after midnight. We've wandered a long way together through these strange rules. The scratch of sumptuary wool, the smothered hearth, the endless fish Fridays, the silent forests where rabbits belong to lords, the hot iron and cold water that let God judge, the locked doors of the guilds, the bells that carved your days into obedient pieces, the shuttered bathhouses where steam once promised comfort. Tonight we reach the end. Part 4-4. This will be the longest stretch yet. Slow, unhurried, letting every detail settle like dust after a long day in the fields. We'll circle back to some of the rules we've touched on before, but with more time to linger, more small stories, more quiet ironies. Then, at the very end, a gentle conclusion to close the circle. No rush, no sudden turns, just the steady rhythm of words, like rain falling on thatch for hours. If your eyelids are already heavy, let them close. The history will keep speaking softly until sleep finds you. You wake once more, the same gray light creeping through the cracks. The straw pallet has left its imprint on your back, a familiar map of aches. You reach for your tunic. Same rough wool, same dull color, same small tear at the elbow you've never quite mended. But today you pause. Yesterday at market you saw a merchant's wife wearing a belt of braided cord dyed a soft blue. Not bright, not forbidden purple, but blue nonetheless. And for a moment you thought, why not me? Why not a touch of color, just a little? The answer, of course, is sumptuary law again, that patient, watchful set of rules that never quite went away. We spoke of them briefly at the beginning, but let's linger here longer, because these laws were more than fashion police. They were the visible skeleton of medieval society. Across centuries and kingdoms, England under Edward III and Richard II, France under Philip the Fair, the Italian city-states of Florence and Venice, even the German principalities, they were rewritten, reissued, debated in parliaments and town councils. The details shifted with the decades. In 1337, England banned anyone below in knightly rank from wearing fur except lamb or rabbit. In 1363, another statute set exact yardages of cloth per social grade. In 1433, Florence forbade women of certain classes for wearing pearls larger than a certain size or trains longer than 3 braccia. The list grew absurdly specific. No cloth of gold unless you were a baroness. No velvet sleeves unless your husband earned above a certain income. No buttons of silver unless you were a gentleman. The surface reason was always the same, to preserve distinction. In a world without uniforms or titles shouted from rooftops, clothing was the quickest language of rank. A peasant in bright scarlet or trimmed ermine might be mistaken for a knight. A merchant in velvet might outshine a baron. The hierarchy would blur, and with it the deference, the obedience, the social glue that kept peasants tilling fields instead of questioning lords. Kings feared it. Nobles feared it more. One chronicler in the 14th century complained that the commons go clad as if they were lords, and the complaint echoed across Europe for generations. But the deeper reasons were economic and moral, twined together like warp and weft. Imported luxuries, silk from Lucca or Damascus, scarlet dye from Kermes insects, sable from the Baltic, drained gold and silver from the realm. Every yard of fine cloth bought from Italian merchants was money that could have gone to the crown's taxes, to the lord's rents, to the church's tithes. Sumptuary laws try to dam that flow. They told the rising merchant class, keep your wealth in coin, not in sleeves. They told the peasant, spend on tools, seed, livestock, not on a hood with a lira pipe that trails too long. In times of war or plague, when coin was scarce, these laws became even stricter. Kings like Edward IV in England issued proclamations not just to look regal, but to keep money circulating at home instead of vanishing eastward. And there was morality beneath it all. The church preached against vanity, against the sin of pride. Bright colors, rich fabrics, long trains that swept the mud. These were seen as temptations, distractions from piety. Women especially were targeted. In 1294, Philip the Fair of France forbade bourgeoises from wearing vair or miniver fur, and similar edicts followed in Spain and Italy. The fear was that luxury corrupted, that if a merchant's daughter dressed like a lady, she might forget her place, dream above her station, upset the God-given order. Enforcement was never perfect. Cities hired searchers to patrol markets and churches, measuring hems, fingering cloth, finding on the spot. In London, the wardens of the mysteries sometimes doubled as fashion inspectors. Neighbors informed, jealousy was a powerful motive. A woman caught in forbidden silk might have her garment confiscated, sold at public auction, the proceeds going to the poor box or the king's chamber. Yet people resisted quietly. Merchants smuggled cloth, dyers mixed cheaper pigments to mimic luxury hues. Women sewed forbidden trims inside plain cloaks. The laws were broken constantly, rewritten constantly, because human nature wanted to shine just a little brighter than allowed. So you smooth your plain tunic once more, feel the familiar itch, and step outside. The belt stays undyed. The hood stays short. Your place remains marked, visible, safe. The day passes in its slow rhythm. Work, a meager meal, the bells tolling the hours. Evening arrives, and with it another rule we've touched on before, but one worth lingering over again. The curfew bell, couvre-feu, cover the fire. We spoke of it early, but let's stay here a while longer. Imagine the sound tonight, deep, bronze, rolling across the rooftops like a slow wave. 8 o'clock in winter, 9 in summer, the hour when every hearth must be smothered, every candle pinched, every rushlight doused. You take the long iron hook, push the embers into a pile, scatter ash over them like a blanket of snow. A faint red glow lingers beneath, just enough to restart in the morning with tinder and flint. Then darkness, complete, thick, almost liquid. Towns were built of vulnerability. Wattle and daub walls packed with clay and dung. Thatched roofs layered so densely that a spark could smolder for hours before bursting into flame. Streets narrow, houses shoulder to shoulder. One unattended ember, leaping to the eaves, could race along the row, jump to the next, consume a ward before the watch could shout. Medieval fire records are grim litanies. London 1135, most of the city gone. Rouen 1200, half the town ash. Paris multiple times in the 13th century. The curfew was simple prevention. Cover the fire. Go to bed. Let the night guard the town. But the rule did more than save roofs. Darkness enforced order. Without street lighting, without patrolmen in every lane, night was when thieves moved, when drunks stumbled into fights, when grudges flared into knives. By sending everyone to bed early, the authorities reduced the hours when trouble could brew. It was crude, yes, treating grown people like children sent to sleep, but it worked better than nothing. Fines were steep for violators, a shilling in some English towns, enough to buy a sheep. The watch walked the streets, listening for the crackle of hidden flames, knocking on doors when they saw a suspicious glow. The wealthy, of course, escaped the worst of it. Stone manor houses, separate kitchens, servants whose job it was to tend fires through the night. Bishops and lords kept candles burning late over ledgers or prayer books. For the peasant or town laborer, curfew meant cold nights, early darkness, the slow creep of chill through the walls. You lay awake sometimes, listening to the wind, to the creak of timber cooling, to the soft rustle of rats in the thatch. Sleep came slowly. Dreams were full of warmth you couldn't reach. Yet the rule probably saved more lives than it stole comfort from. Fire was the great equalizer. Lord's Hall or beggar's hut, both could burn. Curfew treated everyone the same when the flames came. In that small way, it was almost fair. Let the embers fade in your mind. The ash settles. The night grows still. Now imagine the year is bad, the harvest thin, the winter long. You cough once in the marketplace. Nothing serious, just the dust from the road. But heads turn, eyes narrow. A neighbor steps back. Because if that cough deepens, if fever follows, the whole village could be lost. Plague quarantine rules were born in terror and necessity. When the Black Death arrived in 1348, no one understood germs, but they understood patterns. Whole streets died after one sick visitor. Ports locked their gates. Towns posted guards on the roads. If a house showed sickness, fever, buboes, the telltale cough, the authorities acted swiftly. The door was nailed shut from outside. A red cross painted on the wood. Food was left on the doorstep, sometimes paid for by the town, sometimes not. Everyone inside stayed inside until 40 days passed without new cases, or until all were dead. The 40-day quarantine, quarantina in Italian, gave the disease its name. Venetian ships were held offshore for 40 days before docking. Cities like Ragusa, Dubrovnik, built plague islands where crews waited out the period. Inside towns, the rules were merciless. A family might be locked in with their dying. No escape, no visitors. Only the priest slipping in with last rites if he dared. Children, grandparents, everyone trapped together. Food ran low. Water had to be fetched by the healthy, if any remained healthy. The smell of sickness, the cries at night, the silence that followed when the last cough stopped. These measures weren't perfect. People cheated, slipping out at night, bribing watchmen, hiding the first signs. Yet where quarantine was strict, Florence, Milan, some German cities, death rates were lower. The rich fled to country estates, leaving the poor behind. The poor bore the brunt, but the rules saved towns. They bought time. They kept the infection from leaping house to house like sparks on dry thatch. And when death came, the rules followed you still. Burial laws were the final, quiet insistence on order. You couldn't just dig a hole in the yard and lay someone down. Consecrated ground was required, churchyard soil blessed by the priest. But space was finite. Graves were shallow, reused after a few years. Bones were lifted, stacked in charnel houses, the plots recycled. If you died poor, no fee for a proper plot, you might end in the common pit outside the walls, near the dung heap. No marker. Suicide, crossroads burial, stakes through the heart in some places, to keep the restless soul from wandering. Plague victim, mass trench, quicklime scattered, no ceremony. Excommunicated, no holy ground at all. The wealthy bought better endings. Tombs inside the church, brasses underfoot, chantries where priests prayed for their souls forever. The rest of us got a wooden cross if lucky, a name scratched on a stone if remembered. Even in death, rank marked you. The churchyard was a miniature city. Lords near the altar, common folk near the gate, strangers outside. The final rule we'll linger on tonight is the one that silenced tongues, blasphemy and criticism of the church. The church was the largest landowner, the greatest power, the keeper of souls and records. To mock a priest, question doctrine, or laugh at the bishop's hat was to attack the foundation. Punishments ranged from fines to public penance, standing barefoot in church while the congregation stared, to branding as a heretic. And heresy, if persistent, meant fire. The church did not tolerate wobbling. Yet whispers happened. In barns, after dark, when the bells were quiet. Jokes about greedy friars, about indulgences sold like market goods. People laughed softly, then fell silent. Neighbors informed, sometimes for favor, sometimes for spite. The system depended on fear, but also on belief. Most people still feared hell more than they resented the priest. So you bite your tongue. You nod at sermons. You keep the jokes for dreams. And now the night has grown very deep. We've walked a long road together, through wool and fire, fish and forests, iron and bells, quarantines and graves, silence and ash. These rules, so strange to us, were not born of cruelty alone. They were attempts to hold a fragile world together. When one spark could burn a town, you smothered every fire. When one animal slaughtered could mean no plow next spring, you ate herring. When words could unravel authority, you learned to whisper. When disease could empty streets, you nailed doors shut. The rules were harsh, unequal, sometimes absurd, but they kept the wheel turning, season after season, century after century. In the quiet between the bells, in the scratch of wool, in the taste of salt fish, in the darkness after curfew, there's a kind of endurance we rarely see today. People lived within tight boundaries, yet they lived. They laughed in corners, loved in shadows, hoped in the small spaces left to them. And so we end tonight's drift. The hearth is cold. The town sleeps. The rules stand, but the people endured them. Thank you for staying with me through this long, slow journey. If sleep has already taken you, dream gently. If you're still here, listening to the silence, know that the past keeps its own quiet watch. When you need another drift through time, I'll be here. Good night, dear listeners. Rest well. The Middle Ages fade now, softly, into the dark.